came up, and so there were several articles in Time Life and Washington Post and things about him. Quote from Time Life magazine said, Cash accused Lincoln of, quote, trying to conquer the rebellion with the sword in one hand and the shackles in the other because he refused to liberate slaves in Confederate territories. He apparently told the president, you allow 4 million of good Union men in the South who are your natural allies because you cannot lay aside a sickly prejudice. That seems to me that he was accusing him of being a racist, saying if you would free these men, they would fight for the Union, which a lot of them ended up doing. Yeah. But you can't lay aside the fact that they're black and not considered human beings, and you're an idiot. So, yeah. So I guess, yeah, he did eventually see the light.
Yeah.
So as you might imagine, this did not go down well. And so Cash ended up back in Russia. And this time...
Oh, so he came back, went back. Okay.
And this time he was there until 1869.
Oh, okay.
So despite his tempestuous relationship with Lincoln... He is credited with keeping Russia on the side of the Union during the remainder of the war.
Oh, I didn't even think about other countries' involvement in our Civil War.
England almost sided with the Confederacy.
Really?
Yeah, because they were the recipients of all that cotton. They had all those textile mills.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and there was a lot of espionage going on between the two countries, trying to get them to fully come out, and Queen Victoria never would. She stayed neutral.
That's really interesting. Because they had already outlawed slavery.
Right. Yeah.
Like decades before.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
His sojourn to Russia wasn't all politics.
Right.
Supposedly, he pursued a little extramarital action and was often at odds with Russian noblemen because he was indulging in some interludes with their wives. So, when Cash returned to the U.S. in 1869, he brought along an orphan boy.
So, a Russian boy.
A Russian boy named Leonid Petrov.
Okay.
In 1866. Cash eventually adopted the boy and named him Henry Lonnie Clay. And he generally went by the name of Lonnie.
Wait, was this is an orphan? I'm sorry. He just brought a
he just
child
brought
back.
A random kid home with him and said, hey, I'm going to adopt him.
Okay. What did his wife think?
We don't. Well, we will. We will see what she thinks about this. Of course, this child's parentage has been up for debate ever since. Many believe that...
Oh, because it may not... Oh.
Yeah.
It may not have just been an orphan. It could have been his... love child with somebody over there.
And so...
And she was like, I don't want him. You take him.
Right. So the child's parentage has been up for debate ever since he landed in the U.S. with Cash. Many believe that he was Clay's son by a mistress. Some would even say that the mother was a Russian ballerina named Maria Sorostikova Peptipa, the wife of a famous French choreographer named Marius Petipa. So Cash had 2 professional photographs. These were known as carte de visite.
Carte de visite, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
He had 2 of these of the dancer and a photography book that he kept.
I think it's like a calling card.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. It's a photographic calling card. Each of the cards were notated with given to me by her and a date. So the photographs bear a striking resemblance to a painting of a woman that hangs in the ballroom of Cash's house at Whitehall. So for many years, various extenuating family members claimed that the boy was not Cash's son.
It was hers.
That Cash's daughter-in-law told family members that on his deathbed, Cash reportedly said that the boy was not his and that he was the son of a beautiful Russian noblewoman named Anna Petrov. The portrait in the ballroom at Whitehall was believed to be Anna Petrov until it was compared to these photographs, which apparently were fairly recently discovered.
Okay.
So one of Cash's biographers investigated this matter thoroughly, noting that Lonnie, who was the boy, his original birth certificate listed Annie Jean Petrov.
Oh.
As...
And why would they lie on the birth certificate?
The parent, yeah,
that
on the
would
parentage.
Be right.
In a letter to Cash from Count Tolstoy reveals that Cash paid 90 silver rubles to secure a place for the son of his footman in an orphanage. So Cassius' sponsorship of the boy would have extended for as long as it took for the child to be adopted. So it would have been an additional 75 silver rubles a year for his upkeep. So this translates into approximately $2,000 a year in today's money, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that would have been a whole lot back then. So add to all this mystery, Cassius' footman was also named Jean, though his last name has never been discovered. So we think that maybe it's Annie Jean Petrov, meaning Annie and Jean Petrov were parents. But furthermore, in 1876, Clay made provisions for the boy, Lonnie, in his will, stating that he should inherit 1/6 of the Whitehall estate. And if he were to die before the age of 28, that share should go to the mother of Lonnie Clay, Annie Petrov, wife of Jean Petrov of St. Petersburg of the Empire of Russia.
Wait, so he's giving her a part of the estate and it's not even a wife? She has no connection.
Supposedly.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what all this is. Why would he leave that kind of money to someone that he wasn't involved with? Or, this is my theory. I think that Lonnie was probably the product of Cash and Maria Peptipa's relationship. And since both of them were married and probably had a lot to lose if the boy's parentage was discovered, they potentially talked the footman and his wife into acting as his parents.
Oh, so, but wait, that means that they would have put another person's name on the birth certificate.
Right. Well, they would have, it would have been this Petrov couple.
Yeah.
Instead of putting down Maria's name,
Sure.
Because it was quite common for bastard children of noblemen and women to be sent to, well, they're always sent to the country. Pretty much all children were, the French in particular would send their children to the country because it was considered healthier than living in the city. But when they were bastard children, they often were given different names. So they couldn't be connected to the birth parents. So I think it was easy just for Cash to put down the footman and his wife on the birth certificate as a ruse to protect Maria, who definitely had more to lose since her marriage had essentially made her ballet career. So, in fact, Maria separated from her husband Marius the same year that Cash left Russia. And her career was pretty much over after that. She supposedly died in 1882, but Marius Peptipa noted in his autobiography that his, quote, first wife died in Pietrogorsk in 1875. So
weird. But that's who he was describing as her.
Yeah. In the end, we will never know the truth, but it's definitely very interesting. And he brings all this home with him. Yep. And we do know that Cash had always been irresistible to the ladies. So after many years of tolerating his infidelities, Cash's wife, Mary Jane, decided she'd had enough. She apparently separated from him after 45 years of marriage.
Oh my God. Right. And 10 kids later.
Yep. And not to be outdone, Cash filed for divorce in 1878, claiming that she had abandoned him.
How did she abandon him?
Because she left him. Basically.
Well, he was overseas and she didn't go with him.
Right.
Why didn't she go with him?
That's a good question.
Okay.
Well, once upon a time, Russia would have been a pretty uncivilized place for an ambassador to take his family, but by then they were definitely, one of the more premier courts in Europe. So,
okay.
Naturally, since Cash filed for the divorce and he was a man, it was granted. And apparently this action left her homeless since she had been living at Whitehall since the beginning of their marriage. Yeah. And she was also left fairly penniless as well. So I'm assuming that the court did not order alimony. Methinks she had a very bad lawyer. As we've seen, there have been some substantial settlements made for women in divorces and some of these stories that we've told. Yeah. In any case, the schism in the family actually inspired 4 of the Clay daughters to involve themselves in the women's suffrage movement. The youngest daughter, Laura, eventually founded the Kentucky Equal Rights Association and was later nominated as one of the first female heads of the Democratic Party. So, wow. I guess you could say there was a little bit of positivity coming out of that. Yeah. Cash's private life kept him in the spotlight in the last quarter of the 19th century. Newspapers carried stories of his groundbreaking abolitionist speeches and his daring do. In 1894, the Boston Globe ran an article entitled, "Has Killed 4 Men, General Cassius Marcellus Clay in His Career." The sub-headline stated, "Speech of William Lloyd Garrison made him a violent abolitionist." It was almost like a positive thing that he had killed all these men in various duels and public brawls.
Yeah.
It's very, very interesting way of thinking of things. But he did not always attract good publicity. His reputation as an ardent abolitionist had spread throughout the U.S., and some reporters questioned his commitment to abolition.
Interesting.
In 1878, following his divorce, a reporter from the Denver Tribune published an article claiming that Cash had sold his slaves and not emancipated them.
Oh.
Specifically...
Oh, like he just didn't want to be associated with slaves, but he wanted to benefit from their selling. Okay. That's pretty shady.
Yeah. Specifically, the article accused him of selling his mammy.
So we don't know that's the case, but this journalist is positing that
happen,
he...
yeah.
Okay.
For those of you who are not familiar with Southern lingo, a mammy was an enslaved nanny. Mammies, though, were often closer to their white charges than the children were to their birth parents.
Absolutely.
Because they were, they nursed them usually.
Care of them. Yeah.
They took care of them until they were old enough to leave the nursery, which usually wasn't until their preteens, at least. Many of these women were treated a lot better than some of their counterparts, were provided for in their old age, and you see a lot of times still photographs of them that were taken by their owners because they had raised them. And it was a very interesting, weird system. But so to claim that Cash had sold his mammy was a pretty big deal because you would basically be saying he sold his mother. So Cash wrote a defense against the article stating that he had sold 2 women. Both were sisters, one of which was accused of poisoning 2 of his infant children. The woman was acquitted in a court of law, which is pretty extraordinary considering how harshly enslaved blacks were treated back then. But Cash claimed in revenge, he sold the woman down south, which was code for being sent to the fields of the sugar and cotton plantations in Mississippi and Louisiana, which some would argue was essentially a death sentence because these weren't the gracious plantations of old with the fancy White House. I mean, these were literally just thousands of acres of property that were being cultivated by slaves, and there was rarely any actual owner oversight. I mean, they would just hire an overseer and anything went. Those were some of the worst situations to be in. Thus, the derogatory term being sold down south, or sold down the river, was the other term that they would use when that happened. Cash also said that he offered to sell any of the woman's family members along with her so that they could be kept together. He confirmed that her sister, the supposed mammy, chose to go with her, as did her eldest son, but the rest of her children wanted to stay, which you can't blame them given where they were going.
Yeah.
Around the same time, Cash made headlines when he shot the son of a former slave. Cash claimed the man was plotting to steal from the house at Whitehall.
Yeah.
Essentially,
he shot at him, or he killed him?
He killed him.
Oh my God.
Essentially, he had fired the man's mother, who went by the name of Elizabeth, and who had served him as his cook for many years. He claimed that he discovered that she'd been stealing silver from the house, and so he fired her, and she swore vengeance on him. So apparently he was a little bit paranoid when he encountered her son hanging out in the fields near the house. Cash confronted the man and later claimed that he became belligerent, so Cash shot him in self-defense. Naturally, he was not charged with the crime,
right? Because
it was self-defense.
Yeah.
Stupid stuff.
I mean, he said he was an abolitionist, but then that happened.
The best was yet to come, or maybe the worst. In 1894, it was announced that the now 84-year-old man was engaged to wed a 15-year-old woman by the name of Dora Richardson.
Ew.
There are many theories that have been put forth about this strange turn of events. Cash's children from his first wife claimed that her father had been more and more eccentric as the years had passed. In fact, Cash's oldest son warned the justices of the peace in the area to not perform the wedding ceremony because he didn't believe his father was in his right mind.
Right. Well, he probably wasn't.
And so this was big news across the nation, and I have found a lovely article in the Summit County Beacon of Akron, Ohio.
Nice.
Entitled, "A Persecuted Man General Cassius M. Clay tells his family woes. His children persecuted him after he had given up his property, destroyed his happiness, a sensational story. Lexington, Kentucky, November 14th. In an interview with General